Landon Campbell is the founder and host of the In Their 20s podcast, where he explores the frameworks and routines used by some of the most influential people while they were in their 20s by interviewing them directly on his show. Recent episodes have featured notable guests such as Steve Wozniak and Ev Williams, investors Jason Calacanis and David Sachs, and executives like Kathy Besant, to name a few. In addition to his work on In Their 20s, Landon hosts and manages the events and experiences put on by Inside.com. During this conversation, we discussed how content creation has vaulted his career in areas he definitely thought were impossible, his personal key to landing great guests, and how a personal tragedy led Landon to where he is today. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I really think you all will too. Let's dive into this episode with Landon Campbell of In Their 20s. All right, we've got Landon Campbell here, the founder and creator of In Their 20s. Landon, first of all, thank you so much for joining our show.
Yeah, so again, Adam, thank you for having me. Created a very popular podcast, and I just always enjoy talking about the journey because it wasn't always popular. It wasn't always this big thing. Still have a long ways to go as well. We saw a trend, where a lot of our friends, peers, we were all approaching college graduation and no one had their shit figured out, including myself, including my best friend, Michael. And it was just a sad time, not just for people in their 20s, but, for everybody. I will say though, that especially people in their 20s, you're in this defining decade. You need the answers. You want the answers. You're comparing yourself to what other people are doing. You have pressure from your family. It's a very stressful time. So my best friend Michael and I, we had our post-grad jobs already lined up. So we said, hey, we have this extra time between graduation and when we actually start these roles. What can we do to help people? And something that Michael and I had in common, we had a lot of internships in college. So we said, we had so much advice given to us while we were in college. Amazing mentors, great people we worked with. How can we scale that for other people who maybe didn't have so many internships or purely just don't have access to the best advice? Because something we've believed since day one, in order to become successful, you need to see success. So the best way and most efficient way to do that was through a podcast. We saw trends in audio. I believe 42% of US Americans over 12 consider themselves to be monthly podcast listeners. That number is not gonna, we're not gonna see every decline there. People love podcasts, because you're able to learn, you're able to teach, grow your brand, connect with people, network. So we saw the trend with podcasts there. But what we did, we added this amazing idea where how about we just interview the most influential people to share their stories of success. So not like what they're doing today, not so much, how their stock is performing, what it's like being a billionaire, but more the times when they didn't have their shit figured out. So when they were going through tough times, uncertainty, anxiety, those are the stories we share on the podcast.
One thing that's interesting or curious is there's a lot of people who had the same experience, same uncertainty that you all were facing, but they didn't necessarily see content as an opportunity or an avenue or whatever for a change. So what is it about your experiences or what you and Michael were thinking about that sort of gave you that idea to say, hey, content isn't just this thing that we consume on YouTube or that TikTokers use, but it's actually something that can help us improve and help others through this platform?
Content is key. And when we look at content, we just saw it as a powerful tool for mainly distribution, but even more importantly, control. When I think of 20-somethings, when I think of even beyond that, people in the 30s, 40s, if you ask anyone, what they want to do in life, it's going to be different. I want to be a famous music artist, kill it in the business world. I want to do X, Y, and Z. But what we all do have in common is, we're really fighting for that control over our lives. So I think that the way we use content is just as a way to build the brand, but we have control over the narrative. So that's something really magical about our process and anybody that utilizes content. We're able to build our own following, our own audience. We're working on building a community, but we have the control over the advice that people get. And that's not something that we take for granted, but that's something that really goes into what we've created. We still have a long ways to go again, in improving our content, making it better, making it even more shareable, more consistent, and more simple. But I feel like we're really on a good path because we acknowledge what needs to be done with that.
Let's recap that. So it was consistency, simplicity, and shareability. Were those the three?
Yeah, those are the three.
What I love about what you all have built is so often I think business owners especially can get caught in this cycle of trying to transact too quickly when it comes to content creation, as opposed to just creating for the audience's needs. And what you all have
Yes.
done so effectively is you are the audience, right? So you know what those needs are, you know what those likes and dislikes are, and have been able to do it from the bottom up, as opposed to trying to talk down or push some messaging onto a specific community.
I get a lot of inspiration from Twitter. And, it was talking about what a listener of a podcast should be feeling, when they're listening to your episode. And, it's three things. Is this episode useful to me? Do I find this episode engaging? And can I take actionable steps from these insights to put towards my own business, my own creation? I kind of get it first before we release it. So I've been on advice overload because I know our audience also, as listeners, can relate to those three things as well.
So I know part of your story, and in reading a little bit just in preparation for this conversation, is that unfortunately Michael passed away. Is that correct? Over the
Yes.
last year or so, and so you've talked a little bit about how part of why you've continued this is to extend what he wanted to do and his legacy. And I don't want to be overly morose or pull on a very difficult time, I'm sure, for you, but I would just be curious, how has that motivated you to continue on what you all started together?
Of course. No, thank you for being respectful about that. I talk about my relationship with Michael a lot. I mean, he is in their 20s, so always open to discuss this. Before we started the podcast, we were roommates. We lived together for 2 years in a dirty 6-bedroom apartment next to our college, Lincoln Park location. Before that, we were best friends. We met each other freshman year. So I mentioned best friend, roommate, and then co-host. So he was a lot for me. And he did pass away on April 20th of this year. Very unexpected, short battle with brain cancer. I really used a lot of this year just spending time with friends, family, because life is so fragile and just, it's still crazy. Like, it really don't have a whole lot of words on just like what happened. But, we started this together, and he, again, will always be in their 20s. And I was just so fortunate to have like such a smart, analytical person to begin this with. We were very different hosts as well, which just made the dynamic very powerful. But, I fondly remember like we'd still have our calls while he was in the hospital about, updates with the show. Like, this is who's coming on this week. This is who we're getting on next week. And we did begin to organize a fundraiser as well, on behalf of him, his family, preserving his legacy. We were able to raise over $20,000, in a few weeks. So, I mean, it's just, and that's something I wish that he was able to understand. I don't think he really understood the impact, that we were having, because we were just grinding for a lot, on this.
Sure.
Like during that period, you just don't listen to the criticism. So many people came out after and just, during that difficult time and said, hey, like, I watched this interview with so-and-so, and they quote like a specific moment of the interview that I don't even remember. And they say, hey, like, hearing this moment motivated me to move across the country or start a new job or pivoted my career. So I just wish he was able to see that. He really had a strong impact, not just in Chicago, but on a global level, as far as our podcast has reached.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And I'm sorry for your loss. I really can't imagine being in that situation, and especially just the ups and downs of you built this thing together. It's starting to get success. You lose him, and now you're sort of at a crossroads of like, do I continue it? Do I change it? So I guess objectively, what is it that you hope to get out of in their 20s? Is this your business?
Since day one, the focus has been helping 20-somethings, be the best versions of themselves, have access to the best advice. And, how we've done that has evolved over time. We started as a web series, which shortly transitioned to a podcast, and we have an internship as well. We take in students from across the world and help them break into podcasting because, I'm such a big believer in audio and podcasting. I want these students to have their names attached to something, have skills in creating a podcast, because it's something companies are going to be headhunting for. And I know you totally agree with that.
And I have to ask you about this because it's insane. If you haven't engaged with or seen in their 20s yet, Landon's show, just go through, before you even listen, just go through and check out the guest list. It's wild. It's crazy, the people that you've had on. And, from Steve Wozniak to Ev Williams to, like every big name, every one of them is a big name. Jason Calacanis, who we mentioned earlier. How did you all like get these people? How did you go about, reaching out, or like,
Yeah.
how did that happen?
So we started small, but I want to be very particular in how I define small, because
Okay.
every single person we've had on has been influential to me. Maybe not known on a global level, but
Sure.
they've been influential. The first person I had on was a college professor of mine. Our third guest was a college professor of Michael's. We had a former boss, and we just kind of build and build from there. I mean, as you grow, more successful people come on. Word of mouth has been really helpful. Successful people have successful friends
Yep.
that they want to tell about the podcast. They understand the vision of what we're trying to build here. So they're willing to recommend. But something that I really urge podcasters to do is roll out the red carpet for every single guest. And I mean this candidly. It doesn't matter if you are J. Cal or Steve Waz or one of my professors. We've treated everybody with that utmost respect. We've really dug into their story, taken time to have a wonderful conversation with them. As for marketing the interview as well, making sure that they're represented in the best way, because this is good, for their audiences as well. This is a story that they don't really touch on a lot. People want to know, how Steve's doing today, or like, what Elon's doing today, or what Oprah's doing today. But, we don't always hear about the 20s. So I think it's a unique story that people enjoy coming on because they don't talk about it all the time, but their fans, our audience, the world alike, people enjoy these stories because they don't hear them all the time. But I will say, so important to just roll out that red carpet. It doesn't matter who you have. And I mean that like in the most respectful way. It doesn't matter
Yeah,
who you
right.
have on. Everybody should be treated how you want them to be treated, or how they want to be treated.
Consistently again, and the way that you want to be treated is great advice.
Exactly.
Anything tactical, like did you find more success on Twitter DMs versus email, or anything like that, or is it just kind of like it worked out differently for each guest?
I'd say that you can send out, hundreds of the same email. A few are going to take the bait and, join on, but sometimes it's not as productive because it takes more time. But I am a big believer in understanding that everybody has a different persona, online persona. Some people, it's clear that they're on their email constantly because they're talking about how they're on their email constantly on Twitter. Or some people, are open about they don't use their email. Some people are on Instagram a lot. Some people are on LinkedIn a lot. And it takes some digging to understand that. And that's something that I learned with Cameo because, I interned with Cameo back when they were a small company on the talent acquisition side. On day one, all these celebrities didn't know what Cameo was. So they weren't just like flocking on. It took strategy. It took persistence, patience, and unconventional methods of reaching out as well. So I've just realized two things: that everybody has a different online persona, and you kind of got to figure that out before reaching out to people. And B, there's a lot of podcasts reaching out to these people, but not just podcasts. There's a lot of founders trying to pitch these people ideas. There's a lot of, they just have a lot of inbound email, DMs, whatever it might be. So you got to look for unconventional methods. And we don't, tell all the secrets of how we get people on, but I just think you got to think out the box. You have to think out the box and also be in their shoes. If I was Jason Calacanis, who is one of the most prolific angel investors, like in the world, how would I want to be reached out to? So that's something that we really are intentional about, something that we teach our interns, and it's really done us right because we've been able to get some amazing people on. And also, can't undermine luck is like a big piece of it beyond podcasts. Like any founder that finds massive success, they'll tell you first off that luck is a huge component of that. And we've been lucky. We got Beto O'Rourke to come on while he was running for president against Biden. We got like Ev Williams, as you mentioned, Jason Calacanis, who's as busy as he is, was able to come on. David Sachs is going to be coming on soon. Was like a great one. We've had some great people and some random people that you might even never think about. We have one of the co-founders of Photoshop coming on soon, who I'm very excited to hear his story. And it's just, again, you got to know their persona. How do they want to be reached out? And search for those unconventional methods.
So you've been able to generate a massive amount of attention, which is great in such a short amount of time. Any tips or tricks for marketers and business owners who are looking to get some of that type of earned attention as well?
Yeah. No, that was all intentional since day one as well. We kind of had like three things we wanted to focus on, like before launching: recruiting amazing guests, creating powerful content, and then also, getting some press. Like those were like our day one, I wouldn't say principles, but goals. And then we had some key results breaking down how we were going to get there. So before we launched in June of 2020, from March to June, when we had that few month window, we were stacking up interviews. We were creating content before we went public. But another big thing, we were really trying to just understand the mission. We didn't just want to be another podcast that interviewed people. We wanted to get very specific. This is a podcast that interviews influential people to talk about their 20s. And I think anybody can do that. You just need to be specific. You need to know like who you are. Because if you don't know what your brand is, if you don't know your values, if you don't know your mission, then how are you going to expect other people to understand what the hell you're trying to do? So that was really important. And right when we took off, we would write blog posts, on certain interviews, use our media contacts. I was a public relations major in college. So like I've really understood the power of brand and communication. We'd use those contacts at DePaul. We started small. Hey, this is a student run podcast. Let's get some press in there. And, with that piece of press material, we were able to flip that to the next one, be able to show others, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of like how we began with press. And, what was more unexpected was the obvious, passing of my co-host. And, with that, we had a lot of people reaching out and just wanted to learn more about our story. And I, was appreciative of the support and wanted to do everything that I could to make sure that my friend's name, was in the paper forever.
What you said about one leading to the next is so important, right? Especially when you get to traditional media, for whatever reason, I'm not right or wrong or indifferent. It's difficult for reporters a lot of times to think about a new subject or about a new topic or a new individual. And so getting past that first barrier to entry and getting some reporter, even if it's like you said, a student newspaper or your local, whatever, trade publication, being able to get something and then being able to show that as a proof of, listen, we're worthy of coverage because X talked to us about this. And we'd love to, just being able to show that is so important, so powerful. And then having, you have to have something great behind it, something worthy of coverage, which you all obviously did have. So yeah, kudos to you. I love what you all are building. What would you advise a 20-year-old who's listening to this, or maybe even a 19-year-old, if you want to back it up an era, who, is going through a similar process to you, is maybe 3 or 4 years behind you, but is looking to understand how they can get involved in the content world? What would your advice be to them as they're trying to build out their careers?
Before getting to the content side of it, because I have a lot there too, I just want to share this one thing. It's something that I spoke about with a recent guest I had on, Dr. Meg J. She wrote a very popular book called The Defining Decade, which actually talks about the 20s. So it was a guest that we had wanted since day one. Just got a chance to interview her, and that's coming soon. But she brought up this great point that I really related heavily to. And she's a clinical psychologist. She works with a lot of 20-somethings. And she always has these 20-somethings coming to her saying, I'm going through an identity crisis. I don't know what the hell I want to do right now. And I'm stressing out. And there's so much pressure from this or that. I'm comparing myself to this person. She said people should not be having identity crises in their 20s. Instead, they should be picking up something called identity capital. Identity capital is picking up different skills, trying new things, taking a new job. It doesn't have to be for something that you're passionate about. It doesn't have to be for something that you maybe want to do in 5-10 years. It's capital in the sense where you just can add skills, to your backpack of skills, try new things, see what you like, but more importantly, see what you don't like. And that's only going to help you guide and understand what you want to do in the future. And I related to that because I did it. I had 10 internships, as I mentioned, in college, not just in public relations. I was interning at ad tech companies, finance, just regular business, marketing, PR, etc., at startups, Fortune 500s. I just was trying to really understand what I wanted by understanding what I didn't want. So just pick up new things. So that's something I would give to my younger self, something I give to any person in their early 20s or even their late teens. Just go into life trying new things. You don't need to get paid. I took so much free work gladly. And, I'm not saying unpaid internships are amazing. You have to do that. But hey, I think you just got to focus on the work and you don't need to rush and compare yourself so soon. As for content, I'm online a lot. I share everything that I'm doing on business mainly. So if I have like a chat with someone that, is very impactful to my life, like I'm tweeting about it. If I have an interview coming soon, like I'm posting a story about it. I really just am content fluid for what I'm doing. Your personal brand is just so important.
Yeah.
That's going to follow you wherever you go. It doesn't matter what you're doing right now. It might be completely different from what you're doing in 5 years. You might be at a new company, get fired. The thing that's going to remain, though, is your reputation and your personal brand. So I'm my own CEO in that aspect of my life as well. And I think anybody can do that. You don't need to obviously post as much as I do, but you need to build your brand. Become known for something. Like, be the person that people want to go to for audio, for sports, for gambling. I don't care what it is. Like, just make sure people understand that you have that knowledge. You are that point person for that. And from that, I've been able to, be headhunted, and a lot of people have reached out to me for collaboration opportunities, et cetera, because they understand, this knowledge I have, and what I do. Obviously, I'm not the smartest person with podcasting and audio, but I really am just constantly talking about it. So I'm always happy to help people launch their own podcasts. Just a quick conversation, my thoughts, my advice. Don't have all the answers again, but I'm just able to provide my input based off of my experiences. So I think, again, like, your personal brand is super important. And that's why I love podcasting. I think podcasting is a great way to do a lot of things, to network, to have amazing conversations with cool people. But one of the most important things, it's a great way to build your personal brand. People get to hear what's going on in here. Whenever I'm on a show or whenever I'm hosting my show, they get to hear my voice. That's something you can't always do, really through just a post. I mean, it's nice to be able to have that 30 to an hour window of someone's undivided attention so they can really understand your opinions or thoughts or whatever it might be.
Such an intimate medium. And I think a lot of people, that turns some people off to it as they like to have a little bit more control. But the consistency factor you were talking about and the relational capital you can build, I mean, you're proof of that, is really second to none in my opinion. Obviously I'm biased, but cool. Well, Landon, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your story and your experience, and even just the little tactical things on how you've grown